Thanks so much for joining us today, Mike.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, Mike and I were discussing before we started about how in strategic quitting, we talk about these quitting moments where your intuition speaks to you and you know that there's something that needs to be changed. And Mike's had a few of these in his life. One was when he was thinking about leaving the Marines, and another was when he was in a more corporate type job and wanted to leave that. So, if Mike, if you could take us back to one of those moments.
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind is my experience in the Marines, and so I joined the Marines when I was 18 years old. Spent 5 years on active duty, and I was really great in the Marines. I actually really excelled in that environment, and at some point along the way, I knew that I could have stayed on that path, and it would have. I would have made a great career out of it. I would have enjoyed my time in there. And there was this intuition, this divine discomfort, I like to call it, that where something felt a little bit off. I felt like, yes, this could be a path for me, and yet it wasn't my path to keep walking. And so it was a pretty challenging decision, actually. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I needed to honor that feeling, that intuition that knew that there was something more. And so I transitioned out of the Marines, ended up going to college after that, getting degrees in kinesiology and psychology. And when I was done, here comes this second kind of moment in this opportunity to quit at something, strategically quit. I was half and half in this world of entrepreneurship, which I was really passionate about. I was excited about all of the impact I could create through entrepreneurship, all of the freedom as well. And at the same time had this kind of a corporate job, and not corporate in the sense of being in a cubicle or anything like that, but I was working for a company called Bay Club. That's wonderful. They have these, premier health and fitness clubs all over the world, and I was running their fitness programs. And so I was good at it. I was compensated well. Again, it almost felt like the Marines, where I could have stayed on that path, and that could have been very easily a career that I stayed in. And yet there was this intuitive pull towards entrepreneurship, and specifically social entrepreneurship, right? Having a larger mission in mind, creating something that has a social and environmental impact. And so I listened to that, and kind of made that choice and made that decision to quit what was comfortable, what was secure, what was providing a paycheck every 2 weeks, for something that was unknown. And of course, alongside that came certain fears, uncertainty, doubt, all these things. And as I look back on my timeline, that also happened. Those were probably the two macro moments in my life where that happened. There were also, small micro ones along the way, even on this path of entrepreneurship, where, one business venture, it got to a certain point and I could have stayed with it. And I just always ask myself that question of what feels most in alignment to me, what's my path to walk? And I've made a couple more of those little micro adjustments along the way, ultimately leading me to the Greatness Foundation now.
Great. And speaking of fitness, I always like to tell people how I know the guest, because I've had requests say, how do you know these people? Where do you find these people? And I met Mike at a Fitbit local event. He runs these events once a month, correct?
Once a month. Yep.
And he gathers people from all around San Diego, and we do some crazy, fun, different.
Yeah, we try to get creative with it. I think the last one that you went to, we did the playing cards, didn't we? We pulled out a deck of cards and came up with fun exercises to do.
Yes, but the most fun part of that one for me was the dance off at the end, because
You won that.
I won the dance off, and now I
Yeah.
own a Fitbit thing. Fitbit local dance off, which was like one of the most fun things I've ever done under the guise of fitness. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's actually important to speak on, fitness. I've been in that world for such a long time. I grew up playing sports. Obviously in the Marines, health and fitness is important. I studied kinesiology and psychology, study of mind and body, and then got my yoga teacher training certification. And, I've always been in that world. And what I've seen is people avoid it because they think it has to be this one thing. And so they think this is what fitness looks like, and it has to be something you don't like and you force yourself to do. And no, I mean, you just brought it up. What is most memorable to you is that dance off. And I mean, I think if we can create a fun environment, and that's why I love working with Fitbit, if we can create a fun environment where people are dancing, having fun, and it feels like fitness to them. So a little bit of a side note, but I think it's important to talk about.
It is. It's great because it's all part of your quitting journey, because had you stayed with the Marines, I don't think I would have been winning a Fitbit in your dance off.
That's right.
At this point, we all have our path. So let's take it back to the Marines, if you don't mind, for a minute. You said a little bit about your intuition, but how did that manifest for you? Were there physical symptoms that said, okay, this isn't working, or was it just more of a mental sense of there's something else out there?
Ultimately, it was a mental sense. I have had kind of a visceral feeling as well, a physical reaction. If now I've learned to listen to it as soon as it comes up. It's challenging. Now it's very clear to me. Back then it was hard to describe. It was very scary, and I just had to trust. But there was one specific moment where it felt like that voice was talking to me louder than ever before. And it was, in the Marines, you have to put in requests for time off. And so whether it's a weekend or not, it doesn't really matter. Like we think, if you have Saturday, Sunday off, you can go do whatever you want to do. But in the Marines, you have to put in these requests for long weekends. And I remember, I think it was my 4th year in, I had put in a request to go see my family who lives in the Bay Area for Thanksgiving. And first of all, I thought it was kind of crazy. Wait, I'm putting in a request to go see my family on a weekend. And then it actually got denied. And they told me I couldn't go see my family. And keep in mind, I wasn't deployed at the time. Like I was in San Diego, and they just said, we need people on backup just in case, whatever. And I remember getting that back and thinking, wait, someone is telling me that I can't go see my family on the holidays. And just that, and again, I'm very proud of my time in the Marines. I was proud to serve my country and everything, but to have that feeling of not feeling freedom ultimately made me create something in my life where I do have that freedom, and where I can go spend time with my family and friends and pursue the things that are meaningful to me without someone telling me yes or no. And that's ultimately why I fell in love with entrepreneurship in general. It relates from the Marines to that story I was telling you at Bay Club to ultimately entrepreneurship, because I think freedom is what a lot of people are looking for. I can certainly speak from my experience, and the freedom to spend my time doing the things that I want to do and spending them with the people that I want to spend my time with, I think is one of the greatest, it's the feeling that we're looking for.
Absolutely. Freedom is the overarching theme of my entire life. And that's what I think quitting is such a key player in, because if you're stuck in something like you said, you're stuck in a situation where somebody has control over when you get to see your family, or if you're not in an entrepreneurship situation, like for example, I see patients Monday and Tuesday, I have to do the same thing. I have to ask somebody else if there's something I want to do on a Monday or Tuesday, if I can get off, and they are in control of my destiny at that point. And I think a lot of people get to the point where no, that isn't going to work for them, and there's something else out there, but you have to make that leap, and that's where the quitting comes in. And like you said, sometimes you don't know what's next. You just know that feeling isn't right for you. You no longer want somebody else to be in control of your freedom.
Right. And I think it was Martin Luther King that said, you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. I had no idea what it would look like eventually, but all I knew is in this moment, and I'll come back to this term divine discomfort that I love. I talk about it a lot in the content that we share at the Greatness Foundation too. It's that feeling of waking up in the morning and something feels off, like where you are right now, in psychology, cognitive dissonance, same thing, where something, your thoughts, words, and actions are not aligning with who that you are, or what you can be doing, and so instead of resisting and pushing away from that feeling, instead of suppressing it and pretending like it doesn't exist, I go, oh, okay, great. This is God, universe, something's way of telling me that something feels a little bit off. It's not quite in alignment. What can I do to get it closer to alignment, to get it closer to matching up and being on my path? And like I said, it's just been this refinement process of I questioned it a lot. for instance, when I was in the Marines, I go, oh my gosh, is this the right decision? I still questioned it, when I made that other transition into entrepreneurship. And at this point in my life, I'm 33 years old now. I don't even question it anymore. I don't say, why is it there? I just go, okay, this feels off, easy. And it relates to all areas of my life, which is kind of the crazy thing, because it shows up, in my physical health. I intuitively know if I need to put more energy and focus into taking care of my body. And it even knows what kind of workout. Like my body knows, go take a yoga class, go take a day off, go work out, go, take this out of my diet, put this into my diet. It knows from who I'm spending my time with, spend more time with this person or this group of people, less time with these. And so, wow, like talk about, we have this powerful inner guidance system that's always working if only we allow ourselves to listen to it.
Absolutely. So well put. So we're in San Diego. There are a whole lot of military in our town. I think there are like 3 different bases or something in San Diego. So for those who may be considering leaving the military, did you have any specific fears related to that? Because I know there's a whole realm of things that the military takes care of, and while there's that lack of freedom, there's a sense of security in that they cover a lot of things. So were there any specific fears when heading into the civilian world?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you actually touched on them. All of those great things that they do provide, at the same time, you have the fear of losing those. And so because, from your basic needs, from housing to food to, consistent schedule to the paycheck to everything, those things are there and you don't have to worry about them. It's one less thing to think about. For me, there was certainly the worry of, oh my gosh, I need to now think about these things. And am I going to have that same security? In general, I think they've gotten a lot better. When I got out in 2008, they have a program called TAP, the Transition Assistance Program, that is meant to, assist. It's a mandatory training everyone has to do as they're getting out of the military and into civilian life. And at the time, it wasn't very in depth. I don't feel like it necessarily adequately prepared me for civilian life, because again, as an adult, all I had known was the military. I got, joined at 18, got out at 23. Fortunately, there were great groups out there. When I went to San Diego State, there was an SVO, the Student Veterans Organization, and I got plugged in with them. And I started learning from other people that had made the transition. But I do think they've gotten a lot better. But oh my gosh, that chasm, that jump from military to civilian is super scary. And to be honest, with the majority of my friends that I was in the Marines with, they got to the edge. They thought they wanted to make the jump. And because it seemed so big and so daunting and scary, they actually didn't. And so they stayed in. And a lot of them will talk to me now and say, I like the Marines and everything, but they wish they had made the jump, but the fear was too big for them.
And what do you think helped you specifically overcome that fear and make the leap?
The mission, my personal mission, is way bigger than any fear ever could be. That feeling that I mentioned when I wasn't allowed to go see my family, the mission of what I felt like I was really here to do. My larger mission is just to create a better world. And the Greatness Foundation happens to be the outlet. And so this, my personal and professional mission are tied in together. And in order for me to have the biggest impact that I can have in the world, I knew that it was outside of the military. So as great of an experience as it was, as much as I loved being a Marine, the mission was way bigger. I mean, you compare this big of a mission to this little of a fear, it doesn't even matter. It's like, I'm just going to keep moving forward.
I love that. So now take us into you're at the more corporate job, you're working in fitness, and the voice speaks to you again. And was it the same feeling that you didn't have freedom, or was it just, I need to be doing more towards the Greatness Foundation type activity?
Yeah, I think 2 things really came up for me. The first one was, I guess it's really making me think of, it's all in the theme of spending time with my family, actually. I remember going home for the holidays and thinking when I was there that I had to also be back at a certain point to do the work. It was kind of, if I wasn't at the job, I wasn't being paid. And ultimately trading hours for dollars, which it was nice because maybe, it started at $50 an hour, then it was 75 or 100 or 150 an hour. And so, I enjoyed that for a moment and then realized that at some point it kind of caps out. And if I didn't like the idea of having to be somewhere in order to get the paycheck. At the same time, I also knew from an impact standpoint, just like in the Marines, that if I am really going to make the impact that I know I'm here to make, this is a great place to do it. And there is probably a vehicle that will allow me to do that in a larger capacity. And that is this road of entrepreneurship and the Greatness Foundation and growing a community. And so it was both of those things combined of, wait a second, I don't want to be trading hours for dollars for the rest of my life. And I want to create a larger impact. How can I merge those two and actually create something that allows both, that allows me to, that creates, and meets all of the financial goals and the abundance that I know I'm capable of creating in my life without needing to depend on a company or a boss to do that. And at the same time, how can I create larger impact and not be limited by, again, a boss or a company or an organization? And so what I love about entrepreneurship and making that switch is, it's on you. And I love that kind of responsibility. You don't get to push it off on anyone else, as a CEO or a business owner or just an entrepreneur in general. If there aren't results, there's no one to blame except for you. And if there are results, then you've gotten to create that, and you've gotten to be, I'm sure you have an amazing team that supports and everything, but ultimately this is, there's no one to shift responsibility to. And I'm one of those people I will always take responsibility for it. I've got this.
Nice. So how did you make the transition? How did you get the Greatness Foundation started going? Was it you were still working at one and you started on the side, or did you make a clean cut before starting the Greatness Foundation?
Yeah, great question. It was definitely a gradual transition. I know I hear people, a lot of times their stories are, overnight, they quit and they jump over and do something else. In my opinion, that can be very challenging, especially, I have an amazing 13-year-old son. And when there are other people involved, if it was just me and I was letting, and there weren't other people relying on me, it probably would have been a little bit easier, but having certain responsibilities and a family and everything. And so I would say that the way it looked is, 90% of what I was doing was this kind of comfortable job. And then 10% were these entrepreneurial kind of adventures that I actually felt were much more in alignment with my purpose. And then over time, then it became 80-20, and then 70-30, and then 60-40, and then kind of worked its way where at some point, I think it was 90-10, and I was barely at Bay Club and helping out there. And I just got to then make the jump. And, now I feel very blessed because 100% of my life is focused around the work that we do at Greatness Foundation. Things like Fitbit are amazing because I get to, support and work with great companies as well. But I have the choice to work with them. It's not that I have to, right? So if a company approaches me and it feels values aligned, it all kind of comes under this larger greatness umbrella of creating a better world, creating community. And so, amazing brands like Fitbit, Lululemon, and Equinox, and I'll get to be part of that.
Somebody sent me an article yesterday, I think it was from Fast Company, the 7 times it's good to quit your job without a backup. And because I love how you brought that up, strategic quitting generally does not involve quitting your job without a backup. It's, for, like you said, especially if somebody else is counting on you, it is generally more advisable to do what you did, is build up the other thing as, your passion as a side hustle until it can become your main hustle. But some of the things that the article mentioned were, if it's hurting your health, yes, absolutely. And there were 7, but I remember number 7 was if you need a kick in the butt. And I thought that was kind of, if you need that fire under you to get it started, and some of the other things on the list were like, you have a financial reserve. Hopefully, if you need the kick in the butt, you also have the financial reserve. But like you said, that is not necessarily the most strategic / successful way that you're going to make a quit, because it's very risky.
Right. And I think ultimately, to kind of touch on a few of the points we talked about earlier, that intuitive feel. For instance, if that job was something so out of alignment and out of integrity for me, it would have been a clean cut. I guarantee it. But because, it was still, again, my mission is to create a better world, and because it filled part of that need, there was, this personal, and it was overlapping slightly. It was much easier to make a slow, gradual transition, because in this other one, I was still making an impact. I was getting to work with people. I was doing what I loved. I got to be healthy. And so it was still filling a lot of the needs that are very important to me, but it wasn't filling all of them. And so that's why I feel like it could have been a slower transition for me. Again, I imagine if I was in something that was so far out of my personal purpose or something that felt in alignment to me, it would have been much easier to make the jump. And like you said, if something's physically harming you, or you're in a toxic environment, get out of there.
Yeah. And I feel as though if something were so out of alignment with your purpose, it probably would start manifesting in other ways,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Insomnia. So it would eventually lead to harming your health, like this article was talking about. I think those very much go hand in hand, whether or not we realize it. It's probably hurting our health because of how much we don't want to be there.
Yeah. And I actually think, to be honest, it was much harder to make that transition than any of the other ones. I like to give the analogy of a really toxic relationship, for instance. If I was in an abusive relationship and it was very clear that it wasn't working, it would be very easy to leave that. And yet, if something is good, and this is, what we talk about at the Greatness Foundation all the time, of there's good and it's comfortable, and then there's great. And we're always saying, choose greatness, choose that path that's really yours. It's actually quite challenging to strategically quit when things are good. And it feels like, well, it's not 100% there, but it's almost there. So you know what, I can get by. Or this relationship isn't what I really know I'm looking for completely, but it fits so many of these other things. And that's how, this felt. And it's also how certain, of the smaller microcycles of the entrepreneur journey felt, where I could have very easily stayed in them because they had checked so many of the boxes, because it felt partly in alignment. And I'm one of those people, like, I am just not going to settle until it's 100% there. I want it to be fully in line with what I know my truth and my path is.
Yes. I love that you use the word settle, because as you were talking, I was thinking that strategic quitting is essentially the antidote to settling. And that's what you're describing in these other situations, relationships or jobs or what have you, that are almost perfect. But if anything is almost perfect, but technically there's still an element of settling there. And you can do better. And strategic quitting is there to tell you, do not settle. You don't want to look back in 20 years and think, I wish I had tried this thing. But these, as a lot of my guests have said, these golden handcuffs kept me in this job because I was making decent money. A lot of people in sales have a hard time giving up that money, even though they know this is kind of suicide of the soul. I don't love doing it, but there's, enough good benefits or enough cash flow coming in that it's really hard to let go. And like you said, aim for greatness.
Right.
So speaking of the Greatness Foundation, now that we've gotten to this point, I would love if you would tell the listeners a little bit about it.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the Greatness Foundation is a global community. And everyone that comes to the Greatness Foundation has the interwoven value and ethos of wanting to create a better world. And that's a really cool place for us to come from, because we say, if that's not important to you, if making a difference isn't important to you, then no hard feelings, but you're probably not our kind of, I like to say kind people are my kind of people. That's our community. So to have that value is just, and to be growing something globally with that value is really exciting to me. Within the community, we provide everyone with the resources they need to be successful personally and professionally. So our big focus is entrepreneurship, as you can tell, I'm passionate about. So we have these tracks of start a business. We have a course called Passion to Profit, grow a business. We have Greatness Ventures that helps people with marketing and funding and advising and technology and everything. And so those are kind of the two bubbles of entrepreneurship. And then we have the nonprofit side, which we're probably most well known for. We've been doing that for about 6 years, where we focus on basic needs in education. So we build homes in Mexico. We do that every 3 months. We actually just got back 2 weeks ago from leading our biggest group down there. What's amazing is we're sold out months in advance. Our next build is in 3 months, and it's already over capacity. We opened our first school last year. We're opening our second school this year. For last year was in Nicaragua. This year is in Kenya. So we have a big focus on basic needs in education on an international level. Because once those needs are met, if anyone's ever studied Abraham Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, he has the pyramid at the bottom is, your basic needs, and at the very top is self-actualization. So we think if everyone can at least have the opportunities in that baseline met of their basic needs, then they can start focusing on self-actualization.
I love it. I love what you're doing at the Greatness Foundation, and I'm so thankful that you came on to share your story with the listeners today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. For everyone else out there, until next time, happy quitting.